Happy New Year, everyone. The first episode of its Topical of 2025 starts right now. A very good evening to South Africa and those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical, a digital audience with us tonight. Among them, our guests. It's so good to have them on the program. They're going to weigh in terms of some of the burning questions they have for our guests in a short while. 2025, another year, another chance to become the best version of ourselves. Look, there's no guarantees that 2025 will be better, but there's hope that it will be. Hope is important. Why? It allows us to pursue happiness. It brings us into action. And boy, oh boy, do we need some swift action, right? To solve some of the major problems facing this country. One such problem is teenage pregnancy. Children having children. Teen parenthood. It's a polarizing experience. It takes a certain level of maturity to be a good parent, you'll agree. Many adults struggle. I'm regarded as old in many circles, and even I battle. Imagine a 10-year-old. Imagine a 13-year-old going through this. But we need to strike a balance here. It's not about vilifying. It's about understanding the issue, highlighting the desperate need to stop teens getting pregnant, while at the same time showing those who have already traveled down this road respect and compassion. It's important. Equally important is understanding statutory rape in the context of teenage pregnancy, which brings us to the question of the week. And we ask you, an alarming number of teenagers under the age of 16 gave birth over the festive season. Will rigorously enforcing statutory rape laws eventually put an end to teenage pregnancies in South Africa? It's a big question. Let us know at SABC News_TV. Let's walk talk. Context is what it's all about. Does stronger legal enforcement serve as a good preventative measure? Operative word, if it's good, the best approach. What are the challenges of prosecuting statutory rape cases? We will explore this in greater detail. Let us know your thoughts, though, at SABC News_TV. Perspective coming up. All right, let's get you some context, and as always, we'll turn to the magic wall, what we know and why it matters. My guest tonight is Karabo Azoh from the Center for Child Law Director at the University of Pretoria. Karabo, good to have you on the program. I want to just give our viewers a sense of what we're talking about here in terms of the 2024-2025 New Year's birth. Now, this is just one day, New Year. In 2024, that was last year on New Year's Day, that number stood, let's get you some, that number stood at 1,703. Fast forward to this year, New Year, that number went down, 1,444 in terms of the total births. But in terms of teenage mothers, it also dropped from 190 to 80 plus. But that's still quite a bit, right? Now, this has been the word that's been doing its rounds, or a phrase, or the legal context of it, statutory rape. Understanding, Karabo, what is statutory rape? Give us a sense here, because I think it's an important basis to understand this. When politicians, when law enforcement go after some of the people that they think are the culprits, we go towards this part of the law. Help us understand what is statutory rape.
Thank you so much for having me. So I think I'll start with your last point. So the law assumes that children in certain categories cannot consent to sexual activity. So the first one that I want to mention is those below the age of 12. So if you go and look at the Sexual Offences Act, where it defines consent, it makes it very clear that a person under the age of 12 cannot consent to sexual activity. So there's no adult, no other child who can come and say she consented, and the law disregards that. So that is, statutorily, then that is a rape. And there's no defense to that. So when you have an 11-year-old who was impregnated by a 15-year-old, unfortunately, even that 15-year-old has to be prosecuted because the 12-year-old cannot consent by law. Then you have the between 12 and 15, we say 16. That's where the law provides that for those teenagers who are between 12 and 16, if they engage in consensual, very important, consensual sexual activity, and they are not older than 2 years, there's no more than 2 years age difference between them, they will not be prosecuted. But very important to say, if the age between the two of them, the eldest person is 3 years older than the youngest one, it would still be rape. And again, very important to emphasize that consent is the operative word. If there's no consent, it still is a rape, even if it's two children. Then we have the 16, under 16 verse, in relation to adults. So if you're 18, you're 19, you have sexual activity with a person under the age of 16, that is an offense. That's also a statutory rape. So that is what people should know. Even 18-year-olds should know that, if you have sex with a person under 16, that is an offense in terms of the law, and they wouldn't be covered by, by the defenses if the age difference is over 3 years. Right. That is set out in the Sexual Offences Act.
Just to understand this, below 12, there's no debating this. That's rape, right? There's no consent that can be given. Above it, it gets kind of complicated. But statutory rape basically is within this age group. It's a form of rape, ostensibly, where consent is given.
Yes, so if you have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old and they were exploring and there was consent. The sections in the Sexual Offences Act, Section 15 and 16, are drafted in such a way that they say that it's an offence unless if there was the consent and the age difference was not more than 2 years. So it's still couched as an offence, but for the fact that there is consent, yes.
Any penalties for this offence?
So, in terms of criminal liability, we know that sentencing is very discretionary. It depends on the facts and all that. So if you have two children, as I say now, if the age difference is, let's say for argument's sake, the age difference was more than 3 years and the other person is 17, the court would potentially consider the fact that, they were peers to some extent and, and all those things. But if you have adults engaging with a person under the age of 16, the Criminal Procedure Act and the laws that apply in relation to sentencing will be then meted harshly on those people. And you could start with a 15-year term unless if there are compelling reasons to then, move away from that. So that is something that is provided for. Obviously, you can never say all people who have committed the offense will get the similar sentence because sentencing doesn't work that way.
Right. I want to just delve into the causes of statutory rape. And some of the causes is a lack of comprehensive sexual education, socioeconomic disparities, cultural norms, and gender dynamics. The list goes on. Something, though, that is also very interesting and very concerning at the same time is the lack of reporting and prosecution. Now, Karabo, let's call them third parties, if they want to get involved in this issue, take the case forward, press charges, even if the teen mother is reluctant to press charges, can they do that?
Yes, so under the Sexual Offences Act, Section 54, 1A makes it very clear that there is an obligation or a duty to report where you know that there's been a sexual offense against a child. We've seen the recent reports in the media. If a child who's 11 presents at a hospital and is giving birth, clearly by law they can't consent. Clearly they've been sexually violated. There is an obligation on those who are dealing with the child and to report. There's also an obligation under the Children's Act as well, Section 110, that says that if you're a doctor, a professional person who encounters a child who has been sexually violated, you have an obligation to report. So the obligations to report are there and are covered. And I think even the amendments now to the Domestic Violence Act make provision for reporting. The challenge becomes that, as you know, with criminal processes, when there has to be prosecution, there has to be witnesses, that teen who is a victim must come and then give evidence for the conviction to then happen. That is where you may find that the challenge will be there, because if they're not willing to come and testify and there's no evidence of any way to then lead to the conviction of the offender, unfortunately, then you won't get conviction.
Right. Can it be, I just want to clarify so there's no misunderstanding here. Does it have to be a medical professional, somebody in the education space, somebody in the social development space to report this? Or can it simply be a neighbor who's concerned?
It's any person.
Any person.
It's any person under Section 54(1)(a) of the sexual offences. Any person can report, and if they are reporting, well-meaning, not malicious reporting, they are also protected against being charged for false reporting. But also, on the other hand, if they fail to report, there's also a potential penalty for failing to report that your child has been sexually violated. And I don't know whether
penalty for who? Penalty for who?
For the person who fails to report. So let me give you an example. There's recently been cases of mothers. I think there's 2 of them where the mothers who knew that their boyfriends were sexually violating their children and did not report. They then got convicted for not reporting the fact that their partners who were step-parents were actually sexually violating the children.
So what sort of penalties do they face?
So you could get a fine or up to 5 years in prison or both. And I think I do recall there was a case where one mother did get a prison sentence for failing to report repeated sexual assault, a sexual violation of her child by the step-parent, by the stepfather.
And you would encourage this approach, say, for instance, politicians getting involved and making these charges or pressing charges. You'll encourage that approach?
I don't think it's necessarily about politicians. It's about everybody's obligation to protect children, and that's how the law is couched. And even the Children's Act makes it very clear. The Children's Act actually lists, in the first part of it, it lists a lot of professionals, because it assumes that when a child is in certain circumstances, they may come into contact with certain professionals. And then it places an obligation on those professionals to report. And then at a later stage, it even says that any person who knows or suspects that a child has been sexually violated has an obligation to report. So all of us actually are obliged by law, whether you are a politician, whether you are like me, a children's rights lawyer, or a neighbor, you actually have a legal obligation where you know that a child is being violated.
All right, I want to explore this in greater detail in a short time. Karabo, stay with us. I want to bring you this story now. The story of a 12-year-old girl having given birth at a health facility in Komani. It made national news on New Year's Day. This brought to the fore Stats SA's numbers showing that South Africa has some of the highest teenage pregnancy rates in the world. But she is not the first child to give birth in South Africa, as you will know, right? This is a scourge that has been repeated throughout history. Producer Cleopatra Jones traveled to the East Rand of Johannesburg, where she spoke to a 33-year-old woman who fell pregnant at the tender age of 13. Her daughter, now 21, also has her own child. Watch.
I had my daughter at 13, and it was a very challenging time where I was still finding myself, and I met the father of my daughter at the age of 13. He promised me all heaven and earth, and I believed him, and I fell pregnant at 13. Problems and the challenges I faced, those were the ones that were major, were the community. When I started showing and I stepped out, you know, it was so traumatic. It was the most painful experience I've ever felt, where you're walking around with a stomach and everyone knows that I've slept with somebody. And you know, I had a lot of people swearing at me, calling me names, you know, and looking at also that I couldn't even finish school as well. I had to leave school and focus on the child, and at some point I went back. I tried to go back and finish up my studies, and being a mother, I had to make a way, you know, and I've got exams, You know, the father is not there, he's not participating. I had to just figure out how to be a mother, how to be a child at a very young age. One of the biggest struggles having my daughter was the financial constraints that we had. We were struggling to get money, and I didn't understand that nappies were expensive, the milk was expensive, you know. But by the grace of God, my family came through and I was able to raise my child with the community around. At some point, they ended up loving my child, and, you know, the judgment all stopped. Now my daughter is 21 today, and she now has a child who is 1 year old right now. So the challenges of just being a young mom are very difficult because there's this social judgment from everyone. You know, you're not perfect and you'll never make it in Baloyi because and it's something I wished my kids didn't have to go through. Now my child went through the same thing, and it was the biggest fear I've had for her as a parent, and unfortunately it also fell onto her. But however, I'm trying to make life better for her, and I sit down and try and motivate her and assist her where I can. She is also trying to get back to school, finish her school. I'm looking after the child now. I'm a grandmother right now, and I can pretty much say, because I had the experience of having a child at a young age, it was easy for me to adjust to when she had a child, which it isn't that we didn't sit down with her and spoke, but obviously things happen, you know, men manipulate and they take advantage as well, as that you're young and you don't know anything, and the moment life just gets fun for them, it's that 1 minute of pleasure and you are stuck with a lifetime of an investment, which is a whole child. There was a situation where a 12-year-old gave birth, and you know, it worries me a lot that a whole 12-year-old gave birth and the person that fathered it is 28. I feel men should be punished for sleeping with underage kids. There should be stricter measures that are taken for them, because they still go around freely after umntana selale no malume, or even with their fathers, their uncles and their brothers and stuff.
All right, many thanks to Cleopatra Jones for putting that story together. It gives you an insight, pulls back the curtain, and gives you a window into what people are going through currently. Let's get the discussion on the road now. Lots to discuss. It's a multifaceted issue, isn't it? It has bearings in terms of finance, in terms of education, in terms of health, education disruption, financial disruption. Let me bring in my guests to help us better understand what we're dealing with. We have Bukiwe Fanta, Eastern Cape Social Development MEC. We also have Javu Baloyi, Commission for Gender Equality, and Karabo Azoh, Director, Center for Child Law, is still with us. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Also our digital audience as well, please. As per usual, it hasn't changed this year. Pick up your virtual hand and I'll do my very best to get your comments on air. MEC, maybe to you first, with regards to the current situation you're dealing with. I understand a 12-year-old, investigations into the circumstances which resulted into the pregnancy, in the pregnancy of a 12-year-old in the Eastern Cape. What's the latest since this investigation was launched?
Thank you, Blaine. Good evening to you, to other panelists, and your viewers. Blaine, today I wish to address a pressing issue that affects the lives of many young people in our province: statutory rape and underage pregnancy. These matters are not just legal concerns, they are social issues that deeply impact the health, the well-being, and futures of our youth. I want to commend the doctors of Javu Hospital who took it upon themselves to open a criminal case against the alleged 17-year-old boy who impregnated this 12-year-old girl. Statutory rape, as was indicated, of underage pregnancies are alarming realities many of our young individuals face. The consequences of this situation can be severe, leading to lifelong emotional, physical, and economical challenges. It is our duty as a society to protect our children and to ensure that they have opportunity to grow up in a safe and nurturing environment.
Right.
Our laws, as Oz indicated, are designed to protect minors from exploitation and abuse. The Criminal Law Amendment Act 2007 clearly spelled the consent years in South Africa. So, as a province, we were shocked by this 12-year-old. Fortunately, our medical doctors opened a case. Unfortunately, it was the first time that this girl child was in the hospital in November, and it is then that the case was opened. Unfortunately, our communities are hiding these cases. Even at school, they could not pick up this issue. Even the parents, they picked it very late. So
the child was never taken to any hospital apart from the time of giving birth. Is that your understanding, MC?
Yes. The report of assessment that was done by our social workers indicates that there was no way that this girl was in hospital. It was the first time that she was there in November. That's where the doctors picked up, and immediately they consult the family and the police, and they opened the case.
Reportedly, MEC, you want the 17-year-old father to face legal consequences when he turns 18. I was looking at the site. You can tell me if that's correct or not, but I was looking at the site called Briefly, and they posted some of the social media comments pushing back on your comments, saying that it's too late, they should have been done in the earlier stage. You've just explained now why nothing was done. But also, we just concentrating on the festive season. What about the rest of the year? And if they felt that the 17-year-old shouldn't be punished when he turns 18 because he needs to support that child. How do you respond to such pushback?
That pushback is nothing to us because we are law enforcers. Law in South Africa indicates that to sleep with a minor it's a crime, and law must take its course to that boy, no matter what.
Javu, help us understand when you get pushback from community like this. You would assume that communities will be outraged. But given the realities on the ground, there seems to be certain logic that's being tried to be found, whereby they would say, look, if you punish the child now at 17, at 18, how is he going to get a job? How is he going to support his family? Help us understand what's going on the ground, and how communities are forming their minds or making up their minds in terms of issues like this. Javu, if you can just unmute. There we go. Go ahead.
I just think someone keeps on muting me when I unmute. Thank you, Blaine, and thanks a lot on that question. The issue, it's just, like MEC has said, thank you very much, MEC. You have profoundly and rightfully said what the Commission has experienced, particularly in your province, in Limpopo and in KwaZulu-Natal. There's a certain entitlement by society that they have to protect those that are found to be at the wrong. We have done this, Blade. We have seen it numerous times. We have a report whereby in 2022, Blaine, you will be shocked that 933 kids between the ages of 10 to 14 gave birth. And it was during hard lockdown. We ask ourselves, who impregnated these kids? It's obviously it's the family members, it's the uncle, it's the cousin, it's those ones that are renting within the houses. And when you raise our anger and disgust and front of this thing, then the very same community that we're trying to protect, they come unto us to say, no, we need to protect this, we need to deal with it in a family way, you don't have to take it out there. Yet we engage with a health practitioner, Blade, will engage with the police, and the people will end up not telling you, divulging who is the perpetrator in the whole scheme of things. And that saddens us, because a girl child's life, like the lady in the insert, is being robbed. Most of the people that suffer the consequence, it's women. They end up not going to school, they end up dropping out, yet the perpetrator is let go, and it's an indictment to society. It's not an indictment to the MEC, but we need to look at ways and mechanism of dealing with this and nip it in the bud, so that it's not politicized, but society must take also responsibility to say some of the actions that are there. In one school, Blaine, in Northwest, 40 kids were pregnant. And in one school outside Guyana, 52 learners were pregnant. And you ask yourself, who impregnated them? No one will come to the fore to say, it is the educator, it is my neighbor, it is the peer. And society must learn to do things in the manner in which is protective of a girl child, for the future of the girl child. When we talk about empowerment, we cannot talk about empowerment with a patriarchal mindset and attitude to say, you can't come to our family, we'll deal it in a household. And that is something that the MEC must deal with every day, and we're dealing with every day. But we need a consensus how family and education and awareness, and also we're grateful to the health practitioners that they're coming to the fore to say, yes, statutory rape, yes, something what happened, but we need our law also to be very, very decisive in sentencing these unrepentant criminals away.
All right. Javu, hold that thought. MEC, I'm going to come back to you in a short while. You need to take a quick break. I want to get a sense of social workers attached to maternity wards around the country, in every hospital. Is that happening in order to, as Javu said, nip this issue in the bud? We'll take a quick break. More next. Stay with us. Right, we appreciate your thoughts on this matter. Let's go straight to our discussion. MEC Fanta, let's pick up where we left off before the break. Social workers, key in solving these issues, right? Are they attached in every single hospital in your province to the maternity ward to pick up these issues?
Thank you, Blaine. In the Eastern Cape province, social workers are supposed to be assigned to maternity wards as part of efforts to provide support for new mothers and families.
But are they?
They have a role to play. Unfortunately, due to financial constraints, not in all of them. But fortunately, with the assistance of education department has also taken and absorbed some social workers in their sites. But not all. We've got some few that are taking care. But the challenge is financial constraints. We do have social workers, but not in all maternal situations. And it is our wish that we could have all of them, because we do have social workers, but due to financial constraints, we cannot employ them.
Right. So that becomes an issue in terms of picking up these kind of problems. Kustas, what's your take on this?
Good evening, Blaine, and good evening to the viewers as well, and also to the colleagues here. Hey, Blaine, this is a sad situation, in a sense that as we hear that the communities are not cooperating, let's just say, with the state in its efforts to try and to deal with this matter. But my gripe, Blaine, is with the Criminal Procedure Act. We had the Karabo said that witnesses are needed to finalize the case. You can open a case, but there is a loophole within the Criminal Procedure Act, whereby if there is no witnesses, that means then that the case falls flat. By now, Blaine, this Criminal Procedure Act of 1977 should have been updated to meet 2024 needs or concerns. So that gap within the witnesses in the court of law still remains a loophole for many cases to fall flat. And I'm of the view then that as long as we still have it this way, we're not going to win anything, Blaine. We will talk until we're blue in our faces, until we close these loopholes within the Criminal Procedure Act. Thank you.
Karabo, do you think the existing laws needs to be tightened?
Look, I mean, on the Criminal Procedure Act, the challenge is that you always have to look at the rights of the accused in terms of testing the evidence. So that's something a bit more complicated. But there's one area I want to mention where there's a need for a closing of a serious loophole, which is that, under the Sexual Offences Act, we still have special defences for statutory rape. And it's something that our centre actually has now challenged and issued a case against the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. So under the Sexual Offences Act, Section 56 somewhere there's a provision that says that if you're an older person and you are accused of having had sexual relations with an under 16, one of the defenses, you have special defense. You can say that because of how they looked or their conduct, you were misled to think that they were of age of consent.
What?
And that provision has actually led to people's convictions being set aside at the Supreme Court of Appeal. I stumbled on this about 3-4 years ago, and I almost had a heart attack.
So if you can raise a defense, help me, I'm trying to work this out in my head. If you raise a defense that you thought the child looked older or of a certain age, that will hold up in court?
Yes, it has held up. And, I put myself in the shoes of there's one particular case, it's called State versus Mohali. When I read it, I really I thought of myself as a 15-year-old who looked a bit older than her age. And somebody finds you next to a place that some people assume that a child should not be, or all those things. The Act says that it's a special defense that you can say you were misled by the child. And, that it turns the obligation on the child to disprove. So the adult is given the leeway. So it's written pro the adult's view that they were misled by the child. And as I say, as recent as about 3-4 years ago, there are 4 cases where this defense failed in the High Court, but on appeal, the people were successful. And we actually did a research report of about 100 pages to trace where this defense comes from before we actually issued our court papers last year, 2024, to challenge it. Because that is one of the things. If we have the law that still provides for special defenses for people who exploit children, we do definitely have loopholes, apart from all the other challenges about, not reporting and our system being clogged up.
Yeah.
But in the Sexual Offences Act, one of the things that is highly concerning for us is that an adult male, in most of the cases, can say, oh, she looked a bit more developed and I found her next to a tavern, and they don't even have to show that they tried to establish the age of that child. Very concerning.
Jabulani, what do you reckon?
Thank you so much, Blaine. Or is it Jabulani or Javu?
Jabulani, sorry, Jabu, I'll come to you in a short while. Jabulani.
Okay.
Mukubo.
No, thank you so much, Blaine, for the opportunity, and thank you so much for today. Look, one thing that I've learned growing up is that it takes a community or a village to raise a child. Now, colleagues have mentioned something very important in saying that the very same community that is supposed to raise the child is the very same one that is protecting the perpetrator. Secondly, I think this goes way deeper, because if you look at our educational curriculum, subjects like life orientations are there to be able to equip young kids to be able to know what is wrong and what is right. But I feel like these days it's not doing enough to actually equip the kids to be able to understand when to report certain things and when to distinguish between right and wrong. And if you go deeper, you look at organizations like the Love Life organization, Save the Children. They were established and they were there in the early 2005 to create extramural activities. They had programs which equipped young people about HIV and AIDS, teenage pregnancy, and all these things. But as time went by, you no longer see them visible anymore. So it becomes a problem, and it comes to now a situation whereby kids are not being allowed to be kids.
Yeah.
And don't get me started on social media, because you see comments from adults that are not good in terms of when they are sexualizing young kids and stuff like that. So I think we still have a long way to go, but I feel like it's a battle that we will definitely win, provided that we work together as stakeholders.
Right, common concern, important point. Let me take Musa, then Katlako, then I'll come to you, Mr. Baloyi. Musa, to you first.
Yes, thank you so much, and good evening to the viewers. My addition to this issue is that we just need to look at the policies of the school in terms of what the provision says in terms of having the kids to access contraceptives and other issues that are of sexual nature. We need to look at that as a society to check, like, it work enough for us to be able to solve this problem, or we're still way behind in terms of solving the problem. But to me, I think it is not enough.
Right.
And at the same time, I think also need to look at the society itself. When these kids come back at home, what happens at home? As parents, are we sitting down? Are we checking their activities on social media? Are we checking their friends, who's their friends? And then at the same time, what is exactly happening with their life after school? So I don't think as parents we're doing enough. And at the same time, we have just given all the responsibility to the government. And at the same time, the government without support is not going to be enough. And then again, adding to the issue where the sister said that some adults will defend themselves to say that the child is very much grown up.
Yeah.
I don't think that should be an excuse enough to say, okay, for this, the case can be thrown away. Maybe I can go free, because that at the same time, it means that we're not solving the matter. Technicalities of law is not protecting the victim. So we just need to raise up the society to check that, okay, is the law doing enough of punishing? Punishment alone is not enough. What exactly is the core issue apart from punishing these people?
Right.
Is the behavioral change of men happening? Are we looking at kids as men? And then stuff like that, I think society, if we can go back to looking at.
Right. Musa, we're losing your line a bit. It's fading, but we get your point. Thank you very much indeed. Important point indeed. Katleko, let's hear from you.
I believe that more stringent laws are great, and they'll obviously help to get the perpetrators to be persecuted. However, I don't think they are enough, because they still continue to get away with the crime. And this is because the community continues to protect the perpetrator instead of the children. And that is why it is important to educate the children about sex and who is allowed to touch them, who shouldn't be touching them. That way, when they are being touched by someone who shouldn't be touching them, they themselves can possibly go and report them without going through their parents, who might want to protect the perpetrator, as we are seeing as something that's been happening.
Yeah. Mr. Baloyi, in terms of sexuality education taught in schools, does it reflect the complexities and realities that teens are facing currently?
Blaine, there's something that, we always vociferously say at the commission. We are missing an opportunity with life orientation, like even Mr. Makuwe said. I know Karabo's center at the University of Pretoria. They've got a lot of programs that are geared in building capacity for the educators. You will be shocked at some of the people who are teaching life orientation. They frown upon the very same course lesson that they're teaching. And that's where we're losing it. And also, as parents outsourcing our responsibilities to educators. Some of the parents, you'll be shocked. When you engage with them, you talk to men from the commission, you say, what is it that you know about your child? They wait for the age of 18, 17, 16 to talk about sexual and reproductive health rights. Yet these kids, they know it from, it's grade 6, grade 7, somewhere there. So also we need to take blame as parents. We also need basic education and Department of Education, even MEC, I'm glad MEC is here today, that, we need to build capacity and also within intergovernmental this issue of collaboration to say social development. We have these programs, basic education, you've got this program, and also build capacity for educators in the life orientation. So there's this disjuncture in what is happening at school and what we're doing as parents. Some of the men at Blaine, you will be shocked, they don't even know in which grade their kids are. So we have got a lot of present absent fathers, and we have lot of mothers who outsource responsibility not to talk to their own kids, and you later on will blame the kids, the educators. Also, there is a loophole with life orientation whereby there's not enough knowledge from the teachers who are teaching these courses so that they can help us, not only us, but society in general, to build up and also eradicate the scourge of gender-based violence and sexual reproductive health rights in the main. Thank you.
MEC, I'm going to come to you now. But Kustas, I mean, how can we get this done differently? I mean, there are programs in place currently. You'll hear it all over the country. But something needs to happen differently in order to make a change. What do you think from working with community on the ground?
Thank you, Blaine. Thank you, Blaine. This is a war that we are really not prepared to lose. This is a war against girl children and all our children. Sexual education must be implemented starting from home, as other colleagues are saying, in schools, in communities. We must make sure that these topics that talking about consent, health relationships, contraception, all sorts, those things, a parent at home must teach his or her kids. The issue of a boy child, because most of the time, it is only the girls that are being taught. We want to appeal for men to take care of boy children, because they are becoming a time bomb to this country. We really need a boys program. In churches, household traditional leaders must come up in front and help our boy children. Our churches, there must be boys services where they are told not to touch a girl child. Unfortunately, these churches, they are only concentrating on girl children to remain virgins, but boys, they are loose cannons. So if we could build a strong war, communities, churches, also traditional leaders, when boys are taken to the forest, we don't know what they are taught there. Recently, I have a case of a boy child who was raped at the bush by another boy child. And you ask yourself, what is happening? So we want to raise this issue with the men must get in and not let women fight this battle alone. We have been fighting this alone, but this time around, we are calling upon males take the stand. In education, unfortunately, we've got a number of fatherless kids because of men. Hence, we're calling upon them to take up the stand.
No doubt a holistic approach is needed from all fronts. Let's go to Kustas and then Zita. Kustas, to you first.
Yes, Blaine, I do appreciate what the MEC is raising, where he says men need to get involved in these matters. However, Blaine, I have a question for the MEC. Women, youth, and disabilities have got their own department. There is no men department. And that men department would have now come into play. So if she said we must get involved, and yet they got women, their own department, we don't have anything. So I'm then saying to her, how are we going to get involved? You've got the comprehensive national gender-based violence prevention strategy and at the national department. And we are not even involved. So we want to participate, but you have taken us out of the picture. So I then urge you to say, bring us into that comprehensive national strategy so that we could participate. It is true. There are men absent fathers. We have to get involved. And it starts by actually that strategy, including men in it, and also to focus on boys and men so that they can participate. That's just my question to it. Where is our department?
Let's get MEC's response, then I'll go to Zita. MEC?
Unfortunately, Kusta, that question I'm not able to answer. But as a country, we have gender commission. Gender, it means boys and girls, men and women. At no stage that you don't have a platform. In the gender commission, you have a platform There's Javu there who is representing the Gender Commission. Are you contacting them? They are men's forum. They are men for change forums. We need you. In Nelson Mandela, we have Pila and Order. There are. It doesn't mean that everyone must have its own department. No, but the Gender Commission is there for you. These forums we need from you to get in there.
Right.
You need to have parliament of men in national and provincially. What do you want now? We're not going to have departments of children, everything, but we want this forum, and you must be active and make a loud noise. The Gender Commission is there to listen to you.
Zita, let's hear from you, then we'll go to Mr. Baloyi. Zita first.
No, thank you very much, Blaine. All the speakers, they've spoken. But let me try to make a dent on the law on its own. I'm afraid to say when they use the scales of probability, what are they referring to? Because if there is some amendment, it means the law can be amended too. Equally, we are saying that there is no information. Yes, there are information, but it's only for elite. I think all the scenarios which Javu narrated to Krista and Oza, it's more into an urban event, whereby only those who have an access for information can only be accessed to. But all these incidents, they happen at the rural level, where there's a broken family, where there's no lack of information. But my question is, within that area we're talking about, one, there is a what committee member, what councillors, various leaders from religious fraternity. What are their pivotal role when it comes to this thing? Because, mind you, you can say that this lady or this girl child, she has been raped by the uncle who have rented the room or the bedroom. There you can understand that this is a poverty-stricken rape. If there's a poverty-stricken rape, where are the perpetrators in this juncture? Are those ones coming from rural areas? I think this does not need an internal knowledge to understand that those who are suffering, those are coming from rural areas. Right. I will urge, if possible, so Department of Education to come up with a comprehensive program to teach learners about this thing. Even Department of Health, they must visit this. I remember back then, there was this mobile clinics, which they normally bring once or twice in the rural areas. Yeah. People went there just to listen and to be educated about this thing. It must have an impact. But when you talk about something which you can Google, which you can search on the internet, only few have an access to do that. Thank you very much.
Making the law accessible as well as understanding it is important, I think. Javu Baloyi?
Thank you very much, Blaine. I need to correct Zita on something because if we allow it to be perpetuated, it might make it information. People in rural areas are very much au fait with the law. We work with rural people. We go to all the provinces. We work with MEC Fanta. That's why I know her very well. The issue that she raised, and rightfully so, the issue of budget cut has impacted not only to Eastern Cape, but nationally. The Department of Justice, Custas, has got a men's forum. The Commission for Gender Equality has got a men's forum. We do engage with men. There's a national men's forum whereby one of the commissioners is a coordinator. There are lots of programs that are geared into. We mustn't make that mistake of saying, yes, men are being abused. What about women? What about men? Let us level the playing field now to say, build capacity for women who for years are at the receiving end, who for years are not quite. The Human Rights Research Council report says 5 million women are not reporting gender-based violence cases because they've lost confidence in the justice system. And we need Karabo and others, South African Law Reform Council Commission to say, let's close the loopholes. Karabo is doing so much. I've known Karabo for years. She's doing so much at the University of Pretoria. But we need to holistically, because if we start pointing fingers to say, what about Blaine? Even SABC, where Blaine is working, we were supposed to be brought to the studios. There's a budget cuts and constraints. So as people, let's speak in one voice, unionism. Custas is very much allowed to talk to me, and I can even get to the MEC and others. We go with you, Custas, in every field and everywhere we go. We use community radio stations to talk to the people in the various languages. So I'm glad you raised that, but we're giving you a positive response.
That's the energy, I think, you know, and from everybody that's listening here, that's the energy that one would think you would need in order to fight the scourge. But the problem is consistency. A lack of consistency around the country prevents us from getting to that better place, prevents us from putting pay to this issue. Karabo?
Thank you so much. Just 3 quick points. The first one, I support the amplification of prevention. I think Javulani mentioned it. One of the key things that we've seen, particularly in relation to adolescents and peer-to-peer violence, is that we have stopped investing in educating them, and also the challenges with comprehensive sexuality education in the schools that Javu mentioned are a big issue. If we're going to start catching children young and changing behavior for both boys and girls, and then having at least a better future, there is a need to really invest in that, and that's something that we should definitely hold hands together and fight for, that we've seen. Linked again with prevention, our communities are a challenge. I think it's been said about what communities are doing, but we need to also unpack the reasons behind it, which are not something to be proud of. We've seen that sometimes, because of socioeconomic issues, parents are willing to take money from perpetrators and take cases away. And then the last one is also, even when cases do get before the courts, recently there's been a magistrate who actually is undergoing investigation, because when cases of sexual violence of violation of children came before that magistrate in KZN, they made the parents accept money from the perpetrators, and in that way then the cases were not prosecuted. So you can see that our challenges are multiple. Even when the cases that do reach the system, there will be challenges, and we need to address that. But one of the big areas where we need investment is prevention. Cases there shouldn't be cases, ideally, in an ideal world, for our children. And that is something that we must be intentional about. We failed. I mean, Javu mentioned the COVID stats. We never addressed the COVID stats and how it was staggering how so many children were raped then. Now we're talking about the children who gave birth during Christmas. What are the strategic plans to really eradicate and to prevent and to hold people accountable, and to make sure that 15 years down the line, we're still not sitting with the same problem and saying, well, you know, prevention, because the ones who are 13, 14, 15 years down the line, they'll be adults. Then you've missed, you know, and that for me is something that very disheartening, that we need to all really invest in dealing with, because you will have girls as victims, you'll have boys. And I just want to make a quick point about the 17-year-old. Yes, the age difference between him and the 12-year-old is a big one. It's not covered by the law. But what have we done to educate the 16, 15, 17-year-old boys about the fact that, well, you know, consent is this, and even if she's this old, if she consents, you still get into trouble. If you go and ask that 17-year-old, probably he didn't know, and it's our fault. Right. You know, and we need to unpack that.
Karabo, thank you so much. MEC, I'm going to give you the last word. And I just wonder if adolescent sexual exploration, the natural curiosity, the natural development of teenagers, is that taken into consideration by social workers, by health officials, by education officials? What do you think? If you can unmute.
Thank you, Blaine.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Blaine. We highly appreciate the work done by our social workers and our health workers. They are doing a marvelous job, because some of these issues are unearthed by them. Parents were not aware. We are not, as politicians, everyone not aware. But social workers will pick these issues that are very serious. Hence, as politicians, we will find ourselves going to court to say no way to these perpetrators. Unfortunately, justice sometimes disappoints us. Hence, we want to appeal to our sister departments, especially justice system, to please to tighten the screws of our laws that are making the perpetrators to get away with murder. We really appeal. And the issue of DNA is another matter that is delaying cases, even cases that has been opened, and normally these men will always say, no, it was not me. And the DNA is taking a long time to get results. So we want to appeal in that part that police must also be on board. Because sometimes the cases are just going away in that space of police that are not doing proper job when investigation. We're saying proper investigation must take place, and cases must go to court, and NPA to finish the case, and perpetrator is to go to jail.
MEC Fanta, thank you so much. Karabo, Azoh, as well as Javu, Baloyi, digital audience value added as always, weekly. Let's continue having this conversation. It's not a once-off. Let's continue during this course of the year, make a dent into this issue. Thank you so much indeed. All right, before we go, here's my take. Giving birth from as young as 10 years old, as a society, this should shock us, right, to our core and spring us into action, but does it? We can have all the intelligent conversations about it, but if message and actions are not filtering down to communities, to families, to children, we're wasting our time. It will take on-the-ground, evidence-based teen pregnancy prevention programs to get ahead of this problem. It can't be a once-off again. And like many of the problems we face here in this country, it's about common concern and a collective will to change. And that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube. Trends Travel is up next. If you watch a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.